Greetings, everyone. Please let me know you can hear me by typing a Y on the text chat. Excellent. So can everyone see my screen? All right. So how's everyone feeling this evening? So welcome to this training. This is how to identify your soul's mission. Thank you so much for taking time out to attend this. This is going to be very enlightening for you. We're going to explore some things you've probably never even heard about, but I can assure you, you'll leave this webinar knowing more about your particular soul's mission and how things actually work in the non-physical. So let's get started. What you'll learn tonight is what I call the big problem of amnesia. So how when you come here, you basically forget why you came here and what you came here to do. We'll talk about how this problem affects you in your lifetime and other lifetimes, how we can actually solve this problem, and also how you go about choosing your incarnation. So this is very interesting. We'll also talk about how you actually choose your parents and how the mix of a predetermined destiny, for example, when you pick your incarnation, it's like you create a movie of how your life, how you want it to go, but then you're also given free will choice. And this is what makes life unpredictably fascinating because you can actually choose an entirely different new purpose in your incarnation if you've already learned the lessons that you planned out. You also learn how you have forgotten what it is you came here to do. And then we'll talk about how I may be able to help you remember and serve as a sort of soul guide for you and help you with mastering this part of yourself. So that's what we're going to learn tonight. As well, I will be making an offer to help you with this. And whether or not you get this offer, I suspect you'll find tremendous value in this training. So what is the big problem? Well, the big problem is you have forgotten what it is you came here to do, and your life is not completely aligned with your original soul's intentions for this incarnation. So let me know if this sounds like you. Who here really doesn't know why you're here or what you came here to do? Just type a Y on the text chat. All right. Who feels like you've been dropped off on a slave planet and you don't really see the meaning of your life? Because we're in a pretty low frequency planet, wouldn't you say? And for those of you who are working, who feels like your work is not in line with who you really are? Like you don't really know your innate gifts and talents and you don't know how to apply those in your life. What about this? Who here struggles with money and health issues and you don't feel like you can manifest consistently? It's more haphazard. Just type a Y, please. All right. Who here has a hard time receiving accurate, consistent intuition and messages from your higher self? And you feel like you're still conditioned by your parents, society, and the world mind? All right, so lots of whys flowing down the screen. The first thing you need to know is when you incarnate, you as a soul agrees to forget everything other than this physical dimension. So this is called the amnesia of your soul. And, before we get into the details of this, I just wanted to go over how I got this information, because you might be asking yourself that. But I get this information through deep meditation, delta meditation, remote viewing, my guides and teachers, and hypnotherapy techniques like regression and progression, which allows you to regress to past lives and even future lives, but most importantly, the lives between lives. So you have your life here in the 3D, but when you transition, you have a life there on the soul plane as well. So that life there is actually more interesting than the life here. So we'll talk about that. So I've been working as a soul guide basically since 1999. So in 1999, I started DNA Perfection. I have a couple of books out, The Great Master, mentored by my avatar, and I've done over 8,000 live webinars and workshops. So during my work with my guides, I was informed of all of my past incarnations, and I learned how they're all interlinked. So they balance themselves out. Your energy field always has to be balanced. And so if you don't know anything about this, that's the most important thing to know, is that if you have like a lifetime where you're an extremely wealthy person, like Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal, then you might have a lifetime to balance that out where you're like a peasant, you know. So just realize that there's a specific order and structure to all of our incarnations, and this is done at such a high level of intelligence that the human mind can really not even fathom it. Does that make sense, everyone? Just type a Y. All right. And so, you know, if you've read my books, then you've followed the progress of what's been happening with the ascension process, and how my son Eam's incarnation was planned, and it's very interesting. But basically, everyone has a connection to the highest level of consciousness, which is source. And so if you have this connection, you have the ability to bring that higher level of consciousness here into the 3D. And so that's really the purpose of spiritual evolution, is to embody your higher self and become your higher self. And so over the years, I've been a soul guide for many thousands of people. And even now, when I just go out in public, people gather around. It's like they can feel the frequency, or they're coming to get some type of activation. And this is the law of correspondence, where you always attract what you are and your identity. And so you may have noticed this yourself in your own life. Like, how many people here started having like a spiritual awakening around the age of 33? Just type a Y in the text chat. So this is very common when you start becoming more interested in spiritually focused activities. And if you're in a job, like a specific wage slave job where you're trading money for time, you become less interested in that, and you become more interested in spiritual growth. And so existence does have an order and a meaning. And this is great news for us as spiritual seekers, because it means that there is a point to life, and every experience is to learn something. Life is worthwhile. And so once you start realizing this, you can realize that some of the philosophies that are on the planet, like all of these philosophies that say life is meaningless, or everything is just random chaos and coincidence, that that's not true. And so here's really the way that it works. You as a soul exist in dimensions 4, 5, and 6. And here you have your physical incarnation, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. But you have access to all these other dimensions up to the 15th dimension here, and then some people have access to even higher dimensions. For example, the 3 levels of ascended mastery here. And so you come in, you're born here on the planet, and then at certain points in your life, you start downloading the frequencies of your soul, your oversoul, your avatar self, and your rishi self. So this is really the process of spiritual evolution. The soul plane exists in dimensions 4, 5, and 6, and that's what we're focused on tonight, is how the soul plane works. So if you just glance at this, this chart, this is like a code activation. This activates your awareness to what is possible and what you have potential to embody. So, it has a lot of information, but basically the people that I attract are indigos. So indigos have a certain frequency. If you were not an indigo, you wouldn't be drawn to this webinar. So basically, you as a soul is interested in not information, but experience. And an experience of the non-physical is achieved by you going through various inner journeys. So when we talk about inner journeys, we're talking about meditation, we're talking about lucid dreaming, we're talking about out-of-body experiences, and we're talking about journaling and communicating with your soul guide and doing manifestations and learning how to listen to the messages from your higher self and cultivating your intuition. So my work is focused on helping committed students like you to discover your soul's mission. I've done thousands of readings. Discover your life purpose, align your soul's mission with your business. What you intended to do before you came here that you lost because of the soul amnesia. And so here's a question that I would like you to write down that will help you right now, which is there any information about me that I might not be aware of? And so before you go to sleep at night, you can ask yourself this question, and this will help you to start downloading information during dream time, and have your journal next to your bed. Because when the information comes, you're in a very altered state. So as soon as you wake up, you need to write it down, or else you'll forget it. Is everyone clear on that? Just type a Y, please. So this will help you. This question right here, when I first started working with Babaji, my mentor, who is one of my soul guides, I didn't know any of this information about my past lives. I didn't know that, you know, I had this specific planetary service contract to activate the DNA. He verified what I thought I knew, but there were so many other things that I didn't know, because of the soul amnesia. But as you start activating those channels and clearing those blockages, the information is able to flow, and then you can go forward with power in your soul's mission. So you get more and more confident, and you'll notice that when you're on your soul's mission, everything just flows. Everything is easy. There's not a struggle. You're not going against the flow. You're just in receptive mode constantly, and you're manifesting like an architect. You're like a co-creator with God. And so what happens is, and we talked about the age of 33, but in order to progress in your life, every soul reaches a point where it will have to align its desires as a soul with its desires as a human being. And so this can happen at different times. For most people, it's around the age of 33. For indigos, it can happen like at age 22. And what you can do is you can bring down a piece of the soul plane to earth by these inner journeys. So specific techniques like contemplation, learning like you're doing tonight, meditation, creativity, writing, just writing and then seeing what's coming by using your divine self-expression. And by doing the things you most enjoy. You didn't come to the planet to work at a job for 12 hours a day doing something you don't enjoy to get a paycheck so you can pay bills, right? By doing the things you enjoy, you're actually channeling soul plane energies to earth. And this is how you start to slowly open that amnesia filter. Now, the incarnation to earth always feels a bit like it's like a shock, because you're used to being in this field of unconditional omni love. And then when you incarnate here, it's very dense. How many of you are aware of that? I mean, here you have very raw negative emotions. You have war, you have anger, sickness, fear. Everyone is in survival. Last night, my son Ian and I were at a restaurant here in Vegas at the Bellagio, and the alarm went off, and all these people started running around, and they told us we had to evacuate. We had to go downstairs in the kitchen underneath the whole restaurant and stay there. And, Ian was completely calm. I was completely calm, but everyone else was just freaking out. There were people crying, and, these Mexican families just freaking out. And, we knew that we would be safe. And so at first they thought it was a active shooter in Vegas again, but what happened was it was just a glass door that had shattered, and of course everyone jumped to conclusions, and people were running around trampling each other. And when they found out that that's what it was, they let us go back to the restaurant and we had our dinner. And so this is the earth consciousness that we're in. This is the majority of people are stuck in survival mode. So one of the things that you have on the soul level is something called a soul panel. Has anyone ever heard of this? So this is like when you transition, you go with your soul guide to the soul panel, and this consists of about 10 members of elders, higher beings, and they're called directors. And so it's kind of like going to court. It's like a committee, and you go over the original intentions that you had for your life, and then you compare that with what you actually did, your deeds during the life. And so these are questioned and explored, not condemned. Like the court system here always ends with a judgment, right? Well, it's not like that in reality. You know, this is actually described in some of the Bible and some of the ancient Tibetan and Egyptian accounts. And basically, you decide whether you did what you came here to do, and then you decide whether you want to incarnate again. And so this is always just a reflection of your intentions and deeds during life. And so this is basically what I do with my students all day long. I ask them what they desire to manifest, and they tell me, and then I ask them, well, what are your next required actions? And they tell me, and then I make sure that they perform those actions. But the problem is a lot of people have resistance to performing their actions. So when you know that you're going to have this after your life, it kind of inspires you to take your actions, right? Does that make sense? So all of these, ideas such as judgment day and being damned for eternity, those come from earthly consciousness, which is misinterpreting these events, adding a fear spin to what actually happens. So that's not real. Now, another thing that's interesting that you have on the soul plane is called the central hall. So all souls, no matter their experience, finally arrive at this central gathering place called the central hall. And you actually have a soul home. And so the central hall is kind of like an airport. It's like a mass transit place where the energy field that the soul is assigned to a vibratory home. So you have a vibratory home on the soul plane. And over many lifetimes, the home usually remains the same unless you raise your frequency significantly or it goes down, and then a new home will be assigned. And so this central hall is very efficient, it's orderly, and it appears like thousands of highway crossings, but without any traffic jams or accidents. I was just taking my son home, and a limo ran into an Uber. I'm like, okay, so you got two professional drivers here, and they can't even drive. So the central hall is more advanced than that. Now, another thing that is important to know is what happens when your incarnation is done. So basically, when you incarnate, you never incarnate with 100% of your energy. A part of you is actually left behind. And that's why you sometimes meet people on the soul plane that are still incarnate on some planet. This is not the only planet that you can incarnate. And so when you meet them, you notice that they're not fully here. They're a little bit odd. But once your incarnation is over, you reemerge with that left behind part of you. And so this merging happens during your talk with your soul guide or upon arrival at home. And the reason for some wanting to merge later is that the procedure of merging with the other part of yourself makes the earth life seem more unreal and more difficult to remember. So you don't want to be talking to your soul guide without a clear memory of what happened on Earth. Does that make sense, everyone? And the more advanced a soul is, the less energy it takes with them into an incarnation, and the more is left behind. Because advanced souls have more energy, and only a tiny droplet is enough to power an entire life. It's like when I was talking with Babaji, I asked him, is it true that we have 1,728 simultaneous incarnations going on in different time-space zones all the time? He said, yes and no. You can choose that. He said, I chose to bring them all into one. But sometimes I would be talking to him and he would say, look where I am right now. And he would send me a map. And so he could be on like a planet like Alpha Centauri talking to people. He could be in Sedona. He could be in all these different locations because he could project multiple holographic projections of himself. And that's something that is possible when you're that advanced. It's built into your DNA to be able to do that. So it's really interesting what you're able to do. Now, one of the things that you're probably not aware of is that you have different levels and colors of the soul. And so here's how that breaks down. Level 1 is the beginner soul. You probably heard that there are old souls and new souls, right? And so you also have different levels of evolution for the souls. So the beginner soul is white, bright, homogeneous. The status of a soul guide is none. So they're just, starting out learning the game. Level 2 is lower mid-level, white mixed with other colors. So for example, white mixed with yellow, orange, or red. Status of the soul guide 0. Level 3 is mid-level, so solid yellow without a mix of other colors, without any white. Status as a soul guide 0. Then you have level 4, which is considered upper mid-level, dark yellow or deep gold. Status as a soul guide in junior training. So the gold souls are in junior training. Then you have level 5 is advanced level. This is light blue. Status as a soul guide, yes, can be a soul guide and sometimes is a soul guide. And then when you get to level 6, this is a very advanced level, dark blue. Status as a soul guide is expert. And you might be asking, how do I know? Well, there's a way that we can find out, but what can give you a clue are the colors that you're attracted to. Level 7 is extremely advanced. Color is violet. Status as a soul guide is master. And level 8 is beyond advanced. This is dark violet or purple surrounded by radiant light. Status as a soul guide, beyond. So that's pretty cool to know, right? What colors are you attracted to? Just type on the text chat what color you're currently attracted to. All right. We have a lot of different ones here. Green, gold, violet, white, blue. Yeah, mine is navy blue, so I'm always wearing navy blue. My eyes turn really blue when I wear that. So there's a way that you could read, what level you're at. Now, everyone has a main soul guide. So there are no known cases in which a soul does not have a guide. And guides are assigned to a human by a mysterious superordinate source. So this is kind of like, when I was working with Babaji, he was assigned to me. And when I asked who assigned him, he said the one. So there is a source. And then I asked him who his guide was, and one time he connected me with his guide, who is Krishna. And so Krishna was like a very high rishi, and Babaji was still ascending. And so Babaji eventually told me that his contract with me was up. And, he said, I'm bear witness to your awakening. And so, I'm just going to be your friend now. But now I have another guide. So it depends on what you and your soul guide have planned for your life. And what is interesting is the mission of your guide and yourself is often interconnected. Like my mission is to ascend the consciousness of the planet. And so all of my guides have been in that exact same mission. Mataji, Babaji, Saint Germain, Lord Maitreya, Lady Nada, all of those beings are here to raise the consciousness of the planet and to wake people up. And so it depends on what you plan with your soul guide as to, how you guys communicate. So how can you tell if your soul guide is around? Well, if you feel a certain presence near you or something protective like a guardian angel, this is your soul guide. And if you're in a really deep state, like a theta brainwave state or delta brainwave state, very calm, unattached, that's when you're able to perceive them. And you might be able to just see them like as a ball of light in your inner vision. When I was in Sedona, both Babaji and Mataji materialized in my room, not in a full physical body, but in an etheric form. And so this can happen, or in states of emergency, you can perceive your soul guides. So anytime you're in trouble, the channels to your soul guide are wide open, and in emergency cases, your soul guide can actually perform miracles if you call out for them. So that's good to know, right? So a lot of my work is to help you connect or reconnect with your soul guide. And reconnecting with them is not too difficult since you've been connected for probably millions of years. So reconnecting basically adds an additional dimension to your life. It is such a relief to know that you have this team around you at all times and that you can never have anything happen in your life that you can't handle. You're never alone. And your soul guide is the most loyal being that you have around you. You know, they know everything about every single one of your incarnations. You know, they know about all the techniques. And maybe your soul guide actually led you to be here on this webinar. And since you are here, you know, when I announce these webinars, the announcement doesn't just happen to your email box. It comes out on the 6th-dimensional soul plane. So you may have, you know, got the little hit that you should be on this webinar last night in dream time. And so if you're here, you're meant to hear this. You have the frequency to be able to receive the information. And so once you have that connection, you can start asking questions about your life. And then you can find out, you know, what is the meaning of my life? What did I plan before this incarnation? But soul guides, they have super advanced consciousness. So they're not only extremely wise, but they're also mysterious and fascinating. And so sometimes you might ask them a question and they choose to respond or not respond. So they know when to give you information and when not to give you information. So I'm going to pull up this chart again. You see the different levels of consciousness. And another thing that happens with soul guides is they go through specific ordinations or activations. For example, when Jeshua or Jesus was born, he received these ordinations and activations from John the Baptist so he could temporarily activate his 12-strand DNA and be able to perform his mission in his lifetime. And so throughout my life, I've gone through all of these activations as well. And this is the level of activations that are happening. The first level of activation is called the initiate. So this is one who has been born with or accepted transmission of the morphogenetic field imprint of the full 12-strand DNA silicate matrix, that's the angelic human DNA, and who has entered the path of ascension. That's an initiate. Then you have level 1, which is called a minister. So this is one who has accepted ordination by which the Rishi level of personal identity is bonded to and activated within the DNA to begin the process of activating DNA strands 4 through 6, that's the soul level, and to facilitate the alpha huva body merger and soul integration, through which the soul awareness embodies within the physical body. So this is a process of soul integration. That's level 1. Level 2 is called the Rabni, kind of like the rabbi, you know, in religion. One who has accepted ordination for the purpose of accelerating the process of higher identity embodiment, by which the oversoul identity begins integration and the conscious personality for acceleration of the soul and oversoul integration process. And so this begins the activation of the oversoul, which corresponds to DNA strands 7 through 9, and allows you to become a transmitter of the whole imprint. So in order to, you know, activate other people, you require to have the activation yourself. So all of this requires to be done. Level 3 is the regent. So this is a person who is born with a contract to embody as a full avatar during the present incarnation. So avatar contracts, which represent activation of DNA strands 10 through 12, are decided prior to birth in agreement with the higher councils of light. So just like you have governments here, you have spiritual governments, spiritual councils in the higher realms. And so this is decided by the council. Not everyone has these contracts, but you can awaken to avatar contracts through working through the previous levels of ordination and activation. It's basically between you and God. And so technically, at the DNA level and at the energetic field level, avatar embodiment represents merger of the Mahara Huva body and expansion into the Christed identity level, dimensions 10 through 12. So that's level 3. Level 4 is called a consummate. This is one who's born with a contract to anchor the Rishi identity in dimensions 13, 14, and 15 into the bioenergetic field of the body following fulfillment of an avatar contract. And energetically, it's merger of what is called the Raja Huva body. Level 5 is called the Commodore Elder Consummate. So this is one who has achieved full ascension to the triadic or polaric matrix. Remember the chart I showed you? It's beyond the 15th dimensional matrix. You've already ascended in a previous lifetime, and you have returned carrying what are called the capstone codes of ascension within your DNA and morphogenetic field. And you have access to Ascended Master levels 1 and 2 on the energy matrix. And then finally, level 6, the Ekar. This is one who's achieved full ascension to the Akkadic matrix in a previous lifetime and has returned carrying the crown jewel capstone codes of ascension to the Akkadic matrix within the DNA. So this is Ascended Master level 3. Simple, right? So you can see there's always room for improvement, right? To embody more levels of consciousness to become at one with source. So the really interesting thing is you will be guided in your lifetime to receive these ordinations or activations. When I was 27, I received these activations in a very synchronistic manner where I was brought to Sarasota, Florida, which is Universal Stargate 2. And it was very strange to my personality because everyone there knew who I was, but I didn't know who I was. So that's how I received some of these activations. I've also been to many sacred sites on the planet, like Chichen Itza, Sedona. And so when you're on these sacred sites, you receive the frequency that is coming from the stargates and the Q sites. And so that also helps to awaken you. And so you can think of your soul guide as your own personal Yoda. And soul guides are not to be confused with your higher self. So the difference between the soul guide and your higher self is simply you. It's your soul, your oversoul, your avatar self, your Rishi self from dimensions 4 through 15 and up. So without all the earthly baggage, without the amnesia, and without a brain and a body. And another thing that you need to know is that your soul is not within your body. your body is actually within your soul. And actually, your body is an extension of your soul, like a densification of it. It can be very limiting to think that your soul is located inside your head or your body. Up until recently, science thought that consciousness was created by the brain. And some people still believe that. But everything is made of consciousness, and everything exists within consciousness. So these earthly limitations are just plain wrong. And so, since the soul plane encompasses the physical plane, the earth plane is only its outermost peak. So, soul guides, the way that they communicate with you is mostly through your higher self, not your ego and your personality, which is, I call, the world self. And the way that you receive this information is by intuition. Like, how many of you have a hard time accessing your intuition? We're living in a very loud world. You know, most people don't have 2 minutes of silence during their day. But if you learn to cultivate that, you can start to receive messages from your higher self. And there are different techniques that you can do to actually do this. So, how does intuition work? Well, intuition does not explain, it's not logical, and it doesn't always look reasonable. It only points the way. So, intuition, its whisper is very soft. So, if you're listening, you may hear that direction or this direction. But most of the time, it's drowned out by the noise of your daily life and your ego and your personality, which is saying, oh, that can't be right. But in a calm state, intuition can be heard very, very well. And if you're a person that likes silence like myself, then you will have more entertainment with your intuition than you will with any type of earthbound event. How many of you have avoided an accident or an emergency because you felt something was not right, or you had an intuition? Just type a Y on the text chat. Yeah, one time I was driving and I didn't change lanes on the highway because there was someone flashing their lights behind me to get out of the way so they could pass. And normally I would just move out of the way, but I didn't this time. And then the person I was driving with said, why didn't you get out of the way? Someone wants to pass you. And then the car suddenly shifted from the first lane to the second, where I would have been if I would have switched. And if I would have switched, we would have both died. And so when that happened, I looked at the car and responded, that's why. That's why I didn't switch lanes. But this happens all the time when you're in a calm state. It's inner knowing where you just know. And once you start tuning into this is how you open those conduits to your soul guide and your higher self. Now, one of the things that is really fascinating is that advanced souls have the energy to lead many lives at once. they incarnate into and occupy more than one body at the same time. And these bodies can be located in different dimensions, different times, and even different planets. So you can have multiple incarnations going on at the same time. And then some people are what are called parallels, where they have a portion of themselves on one planet and a portion on another planet. And a lot of times they're bringing higher dimensional frequency information from the other planet to here to share as part of their soul's mission. A lot of spiritual teachers and writers are like this, like Eckhart Tolle. Another thing that's fascinating of advanced souls is that they can incarnate without first being born. And so you might be asking, how how is that possible? Immaculate birth? Well, the earthly term for this is called the walk-in. Has anyone here heard of that? The walk-in? So this is pretty uncommon on Earth. And there's some really weird people out there that claim that they're walk-ins. So I wouldn't give that much belief to people who claim they are walk-ins, but it's a very common practice on other planets. All indigos have a walk-in because the frequency of their soul, the fetal body cannot contain that. So if they were to bring in the full frequency of their soul immediately at birth, it would shatter the scalar shields of the fetus and result in a miscarriage. So all indigo type 1s and 2s, they basically have a piece of their soul who starts the incarnation, the birth soul, and then at a certain point in their life, around the age 9 to 12, that birth soul walks out into ascension back to the soul plane, and then the avatar soul walks in. So that's called the soul braided walk-in process. So how do you receive communication from your soul guide and your higher self? Well, 99% of your thinking is created by your lower self. This is just the normal mind chatter that's going on all the time. 1% comes from dreams, synchronicities, coincidences, symbols, light, color, and sound. This is the language of your higher self. And so just be aware of that. Be open. When you're walking around, you will be surprised if you're aware that you'll recognize people around you. A lot of them are from your soul family, and they're also your soul friends, people that you've incarnated with for many lifetimes. And so the communication from your soul guide is often through these strange coincidences. And one thing to remember is that the soul guide and the higher self have a great sense of humor. They're very playful, and they're trying to get you to remember that life is not to be so serious. If you are humorous and light yourself and having fun rather than stuck and serious, then you can have an easier time receiving this information. And so your soul guide is an advanced soul who's mostly assigned to you because they have mastered an art in which you are currently stuck. Does that make sense? It's like when I was writing my first website, DNA Perfection, I was just inspired. I was writing it all night, And when I went to publish it, I was thinking, what should I charge for my sessions? And the publishing app crashed right when I published it. So I thought that I lost everything. But on the screen, there was an image of $100 bill. So that's how they communicate with you. And so I thought, well, I guess I'll charge $100 a session. And that's what I did. And so you need to pay attention to these synchronicities and coincidences because they're all around you at all times. But most people, they have their soul guide in the room with them and they don't even know. They're sitting there trying to tap you on the shoulder, and you're worried about watching the next episode of your binge series on Netflix. Does that make sense, everyone? So as I said before, your soul guide is pure loyalty. The earth concepts of giving up or leaving someone or denying support or not liking someone do not exist for your soul guide. But this doesn't mean that the soul guide just follows every command of yours. They decide for themselves which pieces of information they'll give you and which pieces they'll withhold. Sometimes they're very cooperative, and other times they will simply observe without intervening at all. So they let you experience the consequence of your choices. But this has to do with your own true or hidden intentions and what you radiate. When I was with Babaji, there was no way that I could possibly hide any of my intentions. He knew every single thought that I had, every single incarnation, every single thing I'd actually ever done. So it's like having a Navy SEAL times 1,000. That's a true mentor. The soul guide is only loyal to your true intentions, not your temporary moods, not your ridiculous fears. They just remember what you intended, and they're here to support you. But sometimes they can disappear if you're in a life phase of denial. So if you're just in denial and you're unwilling to confront your problems and their solutions, they'll make themselves scarce. So they won't support you until you started initiating action to change certain things in your life. That's why when you read a book or you attend a webinar like this, you don't just attend it and say, that was nice, and then go on to the next book or webinar. There's a purpose to this. If you don't apply it, then it's a waste of time. So your soul guide, they don't always even come when you call unless it's an emergency. They perceive every call, but they don't answer to just any call. There are tons of Babaji followers on the planet, and they put up all of these, you know, extravagant pictures and all these structures of Babaji, and Babaji doesn't want that. They're always chanting Babaji and doing Kriya Yoga all day, and he's not going to respond to every single call like that. And Babaji is he's so mysterious. He will not let anyone see him, not even in their dream, unless it's his intention. And so you want to think about the wisdom of help yourself first, and then your soul guide or God will help you. Because the only source of help that is always present to you is your own soul. And you have the power to handle every situation. The one thing you have to remember is that you will never actually experience something that you cannot bear, because that would contradict the law of correspondence or the law of attraction. So right now and every day, every moment in your day, you're emitting a signal. You're emitting thought impulses, your emotions, the frequency that your DNA oscillates and vibrates at. And if for every thought impulse your guide was to react to that, that would not be a good mentor. And so the protective part of the soul guide is really only necessary for less advanced souls. A completely stable soul will not call the gods at every little ache and pain, like tonight or last night at the restaurant. It's like this. How many of you have a company here, or you work at a company and you have employees? Just type a Y in the text chat. So think about this. If you're the boss of a company and you've given your employee everything he needs to do his work, you're not going to respond to his calls of needing a pen, right? Because you've already given the employee not only half a dozen pens, but also knowledge of where to get new pens if the old ones run out. But here's what happens. If you have times of intense suffering or intense indecisiveness or sadness, your soul guide is a lot more attentive and a bit closer. Therefore, you can contact your soul guide, which you can think of as your higher coach, in meditation or deep relaxation, when your conscious mind, which is called the censoring mind, is half asleep. But really only do this if it's important. There's no sense in tapping higher non-physical energy and information if you don't use the answers given on the physical plane. And so before contacting higher sources, you want to say, what am I going to do with the information or the energy given? Why should the information be given to me at all? Because I've watched people who have reached certain spiritual heights and open channels of higher level communication, and then they don't do anything with it. And when you don't do anything with it, guess what happens? All of those channels to heaven, or whatever you want to call it, eventually run dry. So if you don't use this for your life, for teaching or music or acting or painting or dancing or whatever you're doing, or for managing a company, there's no point in getting the information. Does that make sense, everyone? So the way that you can skyrocket up the scale of consciousness is when you're working completely in line with your soul's mission. I remember one time I was giving a talk in Santa Barbara in front of all these people, and what was really cool is one of my favorite rock stars came to the presentation. He's the lead singer from Depeche Mode, the band. How many of you have heard of that? So he's actually very spiritual and very deep. His lyrics are very deep. So he's out there, and I'm talking about DNA, and I'm going on and on and on. And when I talk about DNA, I just light up. And I talk for 3 hours about DNA and ascension. And the energy transmission was so strong that people were they were blown away. And afterward, I met with him, and he said, "You know, Toby, you should have an astronaut suit on. You should have a spacesuit." And then afterward, I talked with Babaji, and he said, "Son, you didn't need to go into all that." He said, "You almost ascended the planet too fast." But whenever you're doing something that's truly in line with your soul's mission, you completely light up. So let's go over what we covered so far. Basically, you and your soul guide planned your life that is going on right now. You know, I'm not going to go into the details of how that actually works, but basically, when you're planning your next incarnation, you're in this really advanced theater room, and it has a screen, and it has all these different types of mixers and all these things that you can change, and you decide where you want to incarnate, who your parents are going to be, what the DNA you need for your life is going to be. So you choose your parents based on that. You think about, you know, what type of career do I want to have, all of that, and then it's shown on the screen in front of you, and then you can make changes. You know, you can take the mixer, you can change it, the video editing, all that stuff. So that's kind of like your destiny. But then once you get into the incarnation, you have your free will choice. And so you could change it as you go along. Does that make sense, everyone? So that's really cool, huh? But the problem is that when you incarnate, you have that amnesia, and most of you are probably unaware of the whole soul's process. So that's kept you from being aligned with your soul's mission. And most likely you don't even know what it is. You don't know what it is that you plan. I mean, who here doesn't remember what you planned out? Just type a Y, please. All right. Who here doesn't regularly connect with and communicate with your soul guide and doesn't know the technique for doing this? So that would be pretty important to know, right? Who here would love to be able to master the connection to your soul guide and your higher self so you can become your higher self and you can be reconnected with your best friend and your mentor so you can completely live in line with your original soul's purpose? That's why you're here, right? All right, so as promised, here's what I've got. It's called the Soul Mastery Class. It's an extensive training where you get to learn all about your soul's mission, what you originally intended, and how to access and communicate with your soul guide and your higher self, and how to align your life with your soul's purpose. So the purpose of this class is to solve the big problem we talked about of the soul amnesia and to prevent you from wasting your life doing things that are not in line with your original plans and intentions. You'd be amazed that on the other side, when you meet up with your soul family at your soul plane home, there's a lot of joking and making fun that actually happens. So they will look at the film of your life and look at what you intended and basically make fun of you because you didn't accomplish anything that you wanted to accomplish. So it's like a divine humor. You know, you wasted your life, ha ha ha. So you don't want to do that. So basically, once you go through this class and you learn how to do everything on the soul plane, you'll be able to complete your incarnation here and not want to come back. You know, you have a choice. You can come back or not, but a lot of times, if you see that film of what you didn't do, you're going to want to come back. And some people here, they say, oh, I'll never want to come back. This is a horrible place. But that's from your earthly perspective. When you go back to the soul plane and you look back at what happened on earth, you're thinking, that wasn't so bad. You know, maybe I'll go back, because there's a lot of interesting things here that you can do that you cannot do on the soul plane. But if you complete what you intended to do, then you can evolve and you can choose to not come back. You can stay on the soul plane for as long as you want. You can do certain projects, like there are libraries on the soul plane that have three-dimensional books. So you can get the book of your life and you can study all your past incarnations and you can see your progress, and then you can plan your future incarnations. So it's very complex and there are many different options. You can also become a soul guide. And so if you want to do that, and many of you are probably already junior soul guides because you guide others and you know you've done a lot of trainings and you're certified and you have healing practices and businesses. Once you go through the class, you'll get to that level of being a master soul. And so here's what you'll actually learn in the soul mastery class. So this is a 3-month curriculum, 90 days. And the first thing you'll learn is the purpose of a negative experience and how you can use that for contrast in doing your manifestations for something different. You also learn about details of the death and transition process. So once you learn this, you know, you won't be surprised. You'll be able to bypass many of the things that happen, and it'll be very smooth for you. You also learn about soulmates and soul guides. So you'll learn about how to connect to your soulmates, the difference between soulmates and your family members, genetic family members, and you'll learn about more details about what we talked about, the soul evolution and ranking, white, yellow, blue, violet. You'll learn about which one you currently are at. We'll also talk about your welcoming committee when you transition over, how soul time is different from earth time. For example, 5 soul minutes equals 1 physical earth week, 20 soul minutes equals 1 physical earth month, and so on. And then you'll finally get into the advanced techniques with how to communicate with your soul guide and other souls using what I call telepathic communication. So this is really cool, the way that you can do this. You also learn that there is a soul plane spa for regeneration, rejuvenation, and healing, and how to recover from wounds inflicted on your energy body during earth incarnations. Also, how the talks with your soul guide go when reviewing your previous life on earth and what is covered. I have thousands of pages of communication and talks with Babaji about previous incarnations, specific choices that were made, karma that required to be cleared to resolve situations here on this incarnation. It's really interesting. So one question that your soul guide will ask you, and I would invite you to write this down, you could start thinking about this, is what did you intend prior to your last incarnation, and which of those intents were fulfilled and which were missed? Okay, so everyone write that down. What did you intend prior to your last incarnation, and which of those intents were fulfilled and which were missed? So you can start thinking about that now before we start the class. You also learn in the class how many people on the planet who are actually enlightened and have mastered the game. And I can tell you it's less than 100. We'll talk about the mission of the soul, the real purpose of the soul incarnating, and specifically about ascension mechanics. For those of you who are blueprinter soul group, you're here to raise the frequency of the planet. Other people are divine creation, divine self-expression, divine love, healing, divine compassion. We'll go into more about how the central hall works and how your vibratory home is assigned, how you never incarnate with 100% of your energy and how you reemerge with yourself, how on the soul plane, thought creates an immediate effect. It's like immediate manifestation. Whereas here, it takes a lot of focus and a lot of different techniques to be able to manifest something. You can also determine the setting of your soul group's home, just like you have neighborhoods here and buildings and all kinds of different architecture. Your soul group's home also has a different, architecture. It could be a different style of soul house, for example. But you can connect to that, and then you can actually bring in the image of what your soul home looks like. Also, there are three-dimensional books, as I talked about, you can study on the soul plane, and you can discuss future lives and possibilities. And again, like I talked about, how members of soul families make fun of returnees' inadequacies displayed during their incarnation and create divine comedy, and how the limitations and frustrations of Earth are the cause of great laughter on the soul plane. Imagine the laughter that's going to happen over the last couple years that we've gone through on Earth. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, it literally is going to be very funny to talk about, right? How ridiculous the whole thing was. We'll also go over the levels and colors of the soul and how you can determine your level and color. And then we'll talk about the levels of energy for all of the different levels that you have access to. So the levels of energy for lower astral, mid and higher astral, and celestial on a 1 to 1,000 scale. And I'll also go over specific levels that known people that are at right now. So there's a way to actually calibrate that. There are certain teachers on the planet that are very high frequency. And then there are certain teachers who you think are high frequency but are not. And so there's a way to calibrate that. And you'll be very surprised, because some of the teachings on the planet are not very high frequency, but then some that you think are not high frequency are very high frequency. And so we'll go over that. That's very interesting. You also learn how religious leaders create the concepts of evil and hell to control their followers, and how to protect yourself from lower astral vibrations and the whole frequency of evil. You know, if your frequency is high enough, you'll never even see that. You'll never attract it. You also learn how the mission of your soul is interlinked with the mission of your soul guide, how to call for your soul guide specifically during emergencies, and how they can perform miracles. We'll also go into more about how advanced souls can live many lives at once and how that works in physics terms, how your soul communicates with you during the day and in your dreams, and how they determine what pieces of information they will give you, and if they're going to stay around, or if you're going through a period in your life where you're playing the, poor me, they'll just disappear and they won't show up until you're making your choices in line with your soul's purpose. So as we talked about before, your soul will never experience anything beyond which it can bear. How your soul guide responds to the thought pulses you emit, and how you prevent those channels to heaven from running dry. And then we'll start going into the most advanced techniques and meditations for aligning yourself with your soul. And so these techniques have never been given before on the planet. These are not elementary school techniques. These are advanced techniques for committed people like yourself who have pure intentions and will use the information that you're given to perform your mission in line with your higher self. So these techniques are connecting to your soul guide, connecting to your higher self, and once you start doing these, what it basically does is it trains your attention and your concentration to constantly receive messages from your higher self. Like, this is what I do all the time. I don't ever plan anything in the day. I just wake up and start receiving information, and then I do what messages I'm receiving. That's what I do. And this drives a lot of people crazy, because I'm not doing what they want me to do, but I'm just listening to my higher self. So there's also a technique where you can go to what is called the round table of your paradise to get answers. So this is like going to your soul home and going to a round table with the mastermind of higher frequency soul mentors. And so we'll talk about how to actually do that, because this is where you get the real information about your mission and different things going on Earth that you need to know about in the higher realms that are going to be reflected here. And so you can plan for your future based on this. You also learn specifically how to word and phrase your questions and intentions to your soul guide and your higher self. We'll go over specific meditations to become an entirely different energetic being in about 30 minutes. And so you can actually change your energy to become an entirely different energetic being by doing this specific meditation. And then we'll go over how to remember the most important parts of your past lives, how to remember the residence of your soul between lives. You have a real estate on the soul plane as well. and then how to remember your plans and your soulmates for this life. You actually have 11 other soul mates in your soul family. And so you can, usually when I have a workshop, members of my soul family show up. And so we recognize each other and we start having a very positive relationship, because with your soul family, everything is in order, everything is functional. Sometimes your genetic family is very dysfunctional, right? How many of you had a dysfunctional genetic family? Well, the reason that is because some of those genetic family members are not part of your soul group. You chose them to experience contrast and learn, for example, what not to do with your children. And if you don't have contrast, then you don't learn. So a lot of the things that you chose in your life that may have seemed to be difficult provided you with the most soul growth. And that's why you planned it out before you came here, because you wanted to grow. Imagine the soul growth between someone who grew up with nothing, who learned how to provide for themselves and to finally be sovereign through a lot of trials and tribulations. Imagine the soul growth there compared to someone who just incarnated into a very wealthy family and never had to do anything. That's really not interesting for you as a soul. You want to choose something interesting. So we'll go into how you actually choose your incarnation in detail, and how these future lives can be observed, like I talked about, in a cinematic experience on the soul plane. We'll also talk about how you choose your parents. You actually choose what you will look like, the city you'll be born, the date, the time, everything, what career you'll have, what gender you'll have, and then what type of vibratory environment you'll be born in. You also learn how some souls actually agree to limit their money to heighten their creativity. Because if you're just given everything, you're probably not going to want to be creative in order to create something. So this actually happens. And so we'll go into this and a lot more. As I said before, it's a 3-month training, and basically will be delivered like tonight on a webinar for 12 live webinars over 90 days, 12 modules covering what we just discussed. And throughout this training, I will be your soul guide. So I'm kind of like your earthly soul guide, and I'll help you to connect to your actual soul guide. And so I will facilitate that communication until you can do it yourself. And that's what you'll learn in the training. So throughout the training, you can ask me any questions about yourself, your soul's mission, and I'll verify that with your higher self and your own soul guide. And so what is the total value of the training? Well, if you think about this, there's really nothing more valuable than knowing who you are at soul level, right? You've probably never even been on a training or webinar like this before. And so it is the most valuable information that you can have in your life. But there, of course, does require to be an energy exchange for this on the planet. It's just the law of reciprocity in action. So here's the total value of the training. We have 3 months of advanced training on how to connect with your soul guide, your higher self, and identify and implement your soul's mission, and also to solve the problem of the soul amnesia. So to open up those conduits to your higher self and the higher realms. Normally with mentoring with me, 1 month is $5K. And so for 3 months and 12 live training webinars, the total earth value of that is $15,000. The actual tuition for this will be much less, but it is only available to 12 committed souls. And so the way this works, I know you're getting a yes from your higher self. Your soul guide is probably tapping you on the shoulder, even though you can't really perceive it. You must apply for the training, and the way to do this is just to send me a message on Skype. And in your message, just say, Toby, I'm in, and why you're the best training for the best person for this training, and why I should select you for one of the 12 spots. So we'll just have a quick chat on Skype. I'll verify if I think you're a fit for this or not. And again, if you're on this webinar, you and I have similar frequency. And so, it's most likely that you are a fit, but I just want to make sure by having a quick chat with you. All right, so send me a message on Skype, shivananda.brahmananda. I'm connected with a lot of you here. And are there any questions over anything? Just type your questions on the text chat. Yeah, if you're a fit for the training, then I'll tell you what the tuition is. It's going to be very affordable. Sounds good, Venkat. Yeah, this is the training that I wish I would have had. It's basically so you stop floundering around in your life, you get connected to your higher self, and you start making every single choice in line with your soul's purpose. It's like the soul puts the reins on your ego and your personality, and you can't make a negative choice anymore. And so once you're on your soul's mission, you just feel like you're just on fire. All these manifestations start happening. Okay, we'll chat about that in a moment, Venkat. Any questions over anything we covered in the webinar? Yes. So some of you have probably done the soulcology training. So the soulcology training was about how to identify your soul group and your innate gifts and talents. And so this will build on that. And, during the training, you'll have the opportunity to ask me, what is my soul group? Am I a blueprinter? Am I Syrian? Am I Pleiadian? Because every single soul group has different characteristics and gifts. And so if you know what you have access to, you can align your career and your business and your choices with that. And then really the purpose of this training is to make you sovereign. So you don't have to depend on a soul guide like myself. You become so connected that you're constantly receiving information and you're trusting it. And that's why we're doing this over 90 days. So you can get the practice in, you can trust it, you can see how it manifests in your life. All right. All right, so again, this is only for 12 people. I believe we already have 3 spots filled, so send me a message on Skype. I look forward to continued progress and clarity and helping you with this. Much love to you all, and namaste.